example, the most evident difference when you talk about IP in the US and when you talk about IP in Europe, if you exclude trolls and non-practicing entities, which is another key difference. So I thought that in 5 minutes all I could do to make the point, and then maybe if I have a second, mention the software, which is a gigantic issue where I wholly disagree with what has just been said, is what is happening in the world. I'll shoot out a few bullet points and then try to suggest what they mean. In the last 12 months, because of the crisis and because of structural changes, large corporations have increasingly managed and traded IP as key assets, at the same time as SMEs, who we all recognize are drivers of European competitiveness and sustenance, I would say, SMEs usually don't even patent. US specialist intellectual property funds, which invest, trade and speculate in IP, have now risen to 8 to 10 billion. IP-based financial instruments are now quoted on US stocks exchange. By 2012, there will be a worldwide IP exchange based in the USA. China's Prime Minister has stated that the future competition is IP competition. China is the fastest growing IP economy, and Chinese banks have started lending against IP. Nobody does this in Europe. US venture capital funds invest 3 times more on companies with IP than they do on companies without.
Because they can't invest in real estate anymore.
No, that was before this data. No, this is old data. It's 3 years old. Innovation is beginning to flow both ways, no longer only from developed to developing, but also the other way around. This drives a lot of fundamental changes in corporate law, in administration and in law. So the key message out of all of these, which I had to read very quickly, I'm sorry, is that if Europe is looking to innovation and IP as drivers of competitiveness and growth, which we all say we are, we need evidently more dynamic IP policies, more finance for IP, and, to my mind, some kind of IP exchange, of IP marketplace, more IP buy and sell. That would be consistent, by the way, with the true industrial situation in Europe, which is a territory torn between 2 strategies. To my mind, we have a strategy to enhance the technological content of your company and production and therefore drive a high-tech strategy, or you improve and accelerate the existing contents, and that means what I call an old-tech strategy. In other words, you drive all kinds of technological level and adjust, and basically it means more incremental innovation, which is what drives SMEs, I repeat, no end. So most countries are stuck with the second strategy. They don't have time and resources to think of becoming a high-tech nation. Very few do, in fact. So the result is innovation and IP has to increase demand, supply, and matching of the two, which means some kinds of more dynamic trading of IP as an asset, which it is becoming. So some suggested actions. Move away from typical R&D bias, which has been historical bias in Europe, towards what I call applied innovation, more downstream, from upstream down the value chain to downstream. Move away from historical high-tech towards low, mid, and high-tech. Nobody wants to exclude the super research, but that has dominated funding, and to most SMEs that's not good enough. Move away from historically large corporations towards SMEs and micro and spin-offs, as well as large corp in R&D funding, which is, they dominate completely. I'll give an example of this, a concrete example. Over the last 3 years, I'd give an example which is based on my market, but it's very significant. You know that in most of these IP funding, IP enabling of startups and technological development, we look at venture capital as the answer. Private funding is mostly represented by that. Nobody even thinks about banks. If I take Italy, in the last 3 years, including 2008, therefore, which is a crisis year, you have the 5.4 billion euros, that is the size of the Italian professional investor market, has invested 127 million euros in what they call startup and early stage funding. So let's consider the whole of technology. Finished. Two single companies, two little boutique companies, but specialized in IP financing, have funded 125 million. That is, to my mind, a startling example of how this new breed of IP expert financing is changing the scene and giving a lot of hope to the widespreading of IP as an asset with which to give innovation and growth. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Giancarlo. Now, I guess the last person here on the panel, before we give the word to Christian Engström, is Francisco. Francisco, maybe you can quickly talk, give your perspective on what has been said. I guess, go ahead.
Chair, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for holding back until late in the evening, because I know it's late and everybody's tired. So just very briefly on some of the comments that were made. We cannot read my 2 or 3 points, so I'll read them for you. First, perhaps the strategic and coordinated or coherent strategy at EU level on IPR. I think that was mentioned, including in your slide, Bernd, and also I understand from your presentation there's something a bit more holistic about how to deal with the European policy on IPR, whether it's patent and copyright. So this is something we would like to see happen. We've seen initiatives in the Commission. We've seen initiatives in the Parliament. There was a meeting here convened by MEP Bill Newton-Dunn a few weeks ago. So these are steps in the right direction, but there is still a lot of, I would say, cohesion that needs to be found, because we have example where, on the one hand, for example, the European Commission is helping a company defend its patent in Taiwan against a compulsory license, and on the other hand, another part of the Commission is suggesting some kind of compulsory licenses here in Brussels. So there is a bit of cohesion, not coordination, but cohesion, because there's no point of taking away competences from the different DGs and so on, but to have someone which can be provide a bit of coherence and develop this policy and include also the financial funding aspects. The US, because we take the US as an example, has appointed a czar. Maybe we want an IP evangelist or something a little bit less, of a copy of what the US is doing. So that's one point, and I think this would be an important point now that the Commission is in a flux and a bit of a political vacuum, and that they don't know how many commissioners will be there, will depend on what the Czech sign or don't sign. So maybe it's time to create that, and I know many organizations have already requested President Barroso to consider that kind of position. So that's one. The other thing I'll mention is this copyright protection online, and there is a development today on this telecom package, and a legal opinion from the services of the Parliament. The legal services of the Parliament was just leaked by a group of activists online, and I'd like to have a word and perhaps open a discussion. But before that, on your point on territoriality, in the software business, and that also applies to the software games, we don't have the problem because we're not subject to the collective management of collecting societies. So software producers and